I'm Charlotte. You're watching The Ugly Atheist. Today, I'm going to talk about a recent discovery that I read an article regarding just last week, I think. Um, a report came out last week that talked about a study they did on mice pertaining to a specific gene that codes for our ability to speak language. And apparently, all mammals, at least, have this gene, but it is a very different variety in only Homo sapiens. And it is called the NOVA1 gene, the NOVA1. So previously, they had found a gene called the FOXP2 gene, and they did the same experiment. I don't know how many years ago that was, but where they removed using CRISPR editing, I believe. They were able to remove the mouse version of that gene and replace it with the human variant. So it's the same gene, but just expresses itself differently in humans than in any other animal. And what they found was that the mice had developed significantly more complicated vocalizations. The same sort of thing happened recently when they did the NOVA1 gene variant. They took the human variant and put it in mice, and the mice, not only did they express very complex vocalizations, but they also seemed to be able to navigate mazes with a lot greater proficiency and intention. The areas where the complexity of vocalization was most pronounced were in the two areas of mouse behavior. One was their when they're alerting other mice to a potential danger. That's one instance in which their vocalizations, or the complexity brought about by FOXP2 and NOVA1 gene, were the most noticeable. And then the other one was in mate selection. The other instance was mate selection. So those are two clues to me as to how language likely arose in humans as well. I had always thought that the first vocalizations made by hominids were along the lines of trying to communicate where resources could be acquired. And according to this study with mice, it might actually be the first inspirations for complex vocalizations were in the arena of mate selection and in the arena of avoiding danger. And what's interesting is that these genes are located in sort of near the amygdala, I guess, in the central region of the brain. But most of our speech-related regions of our brain are on the left hemisphere, first of all. And secondly, they're just a lot of specific areas like the Broca's region, the Wernicke's region, the prime motor cortex, all of them working together to not only listen to and understand language, process it, and then the message gets sent around to various locations in your left hemisphere to then produce the mouth movements and tongue movements and larynx movements to respond to what was the language being understood, language being heard and understood, and has to respond appropriately. What this study about the mice didn't discuss, that I didn't see or read about that in the article anyway, was how other mice responded to these complicated vocalizations. And the fact that these human variants increased not only the mouse's or the mice vocal acuity and complexity, but it increased their intelligence. So there's some kind of coattail emergent behavior or function that goes along with greater complexity in speech vocalizations. So one thing that they touched on in this article was that both the FOXP2 and the NOVA1 gene, while they're found in Neanderthals and in Denisovans, those are our closest contemporaries, they were not the same variant. They were the same variant that were found in like mice and other mammals, but they were not the same variant that were found in Homo sapiens. So that leads researchers to conclude or to speculate that Neanderthals, while they probably were able to they probably had a language, it was nowhere near as sophisticated as that of Homo sapiens, which means that while their brains are larger than ours, then that doesn't necessarily mean that they were more intelligent, at least not in the abstract or analytical sense. Maybe they had greater intelligence with regard to resource allocation and surviving in ridiculously cold environments. And maybe they had very complicated social structures and hierarchies, but they probably weren't good at problem solving in terms of like abstract problem solving, like thinking multiple degrees out in a causal chain of events. And so this leads to one of my hypotheses on this finding is like, what is it that changed the human NOVA1 and FOXP2 genes to become more facilitating of language acquisition and learning and development. And I think it might have something to do with our environment. We were cooking food even before we were Homo sapiens. The species of humans that came before us had already mastered fire. And I think there must be some chemical change that happens in cooked food. I know that, as we discussed earlier, that when you cook food, it very much aids your digestive system so that you spend significantly less time and energy, rather, digesting food. And most of that saved energy, for some reason, gets reallocated to brain development. I don't know why that is. I don't know why it doesn't go into muscle development or liver development, but for some reason, all that extra energy we saved from cooking our food went into brain development. And so I'm thinking that along with that energy diversion, there are brand new chemicals that result from cooking or burning food that sort of messed with the DNA in that particular region. And all this new chemistry, along with the newly allocated energy, it seemed that probably played a role in modifying these genes and their expressions. So going back to the experiment with the mice, they were able to splice in, using CRISPR gene editing technology, the human variant into a mouse. But what I think would be interesting is if they tried to do that with a higher primate or something like a chimpanzee. And I wonder what the result would be with that kind of a mutation in place. I don't know if that crosses any ethical lines, if the chimpanzee is suddenly able to communicate in a much more human way. Not sure what that would mean ethically if we would now regard them as a sentient. I guess they're already sentient, but regard them as some kind of an equal to humans on some level, to where they would start to have human rights, even though they're not human. But if they're able to communicate with us and express, their dissatisfaction with being cooped up in a laboratory, that sort of thing. Um, I don't know. I don't know if that's something that we're going to try in the future, or maybe it's too difficult to edit chimpanzee genetics in the same way that you can a mouse's genetics. But it'd be interesting to find out what happens. Another hypothesis that I've heard, or that seems to make sense, is that humans developed speech firstly. So we talked about there are two instances in which the complex vocalizations in the mouse models were used, and that was in alerting others to danger and in mate selection. But of those two, I would hypothesize that mate selection is the more critical one, and the one that probably uh, was served as the catalyst for the first meaningful vocalizations. And in that vein, I think that the attraction of a mate probably involved music or singing. So I think early hominid males would, in order to woo a female, would engage in singing, and that would further, or that would cause their esophageal and larynx voice box area to develop in a much more controlled way, so that they can create these beautiful melodies, and then create words, or some semblance of words or phonemes that would go along with these melodic vocalizations. And that is what probably led to the first words being created. Um, so that's sort of a hypothesis that makes sense to me. I'm not a linguist, and I'm not an anthropologist, though those fields fascinate me. So I know there's a lot more to the development and evolution of human language, human ability to speak. Um, and I don't know if this is probably something that I want to delve into some more. And as new discoveries come up, I will want to do a report on them, or do a video on them. Um, but in the meantime, yeah, it's just an exciting development in figuring out more about ourselves and more about where we came from, and uh, how unique we are on this planet. So I guess, for the sake of not rambling forever on this topic, I will end it there. I'm Charlotte. You're watching The Ugly Atheist, and I appreciate you watching. If you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe, and I will see you next week. Thank you.